Welcome to the lighter side of the spectrum, a podcast where we explore how to find joy, connection, and growth while navigating the challenges of parenting kids and teens on the autism spectrum. Remember that inclusion and hope are key to making life better for everyone, and that even in the most challenging moments, there's always a lighter side. Now here's your host, David Coffer.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Lighter Side of the Spectrum. Today, I am thrilled to welcome Tony Beals, who's the VP of Admissions and Enrollment Solutions at Brightmont Academy in Seattle. As many parents of kids on the autism spectrum know, or may not know, but navigating the educational landscape can be challenging. What some may not realize is there are options beyond public schools. And these options are designed specifically to meet individualized needs of neurodiverse students. While public schools do have a legal obligation to accommodate all children, many fall short, unfortunately, often fulfilling only the bare minimum required by law. Brightmont Academy, however, takes a different approach. It offers a flexible, personalized instruction that addresses each child's needs. And so I've been lucky enough to be introduced to Tony and to Brightmont over best about, year and a half now we're talking about. And so welcome, Tony, to be here on the David Coffer podcast. Thanks for joining me.
No, thank you very much. I'm really excited to join you and to just talk through about these kind of things that I think people just don't realize that there's opportunities for their kids.
That's 100%. Yeah. And I'm excited to dive into that. I've learned a ton, obviously, just through our experience and things that, as is the case with a lot of things on this journey as a parent, I wish I would have known 10 years ago or realized. But why don't we kick things off? Why don't you help sharing a bit about your background, kind of what drew you to working with families and students at Brightmont Academy?
Yeah, I was a public school teacher, and I was one of those idealistic teachers that wanted to teach everybody. I wanted to walk away feeling like I've inspired the whole class and I could teach the way I wanted to and be creative. But then once I got into the public classroom, it wasn't that way. And it created a lot of feelings of depression
Mm,
and just frustration as a teacher because I felt like, why am I doing this? Every day I walk away and I'm only really reaching a certain number of kids, and I feel bad because I can't get this group that I really want to help because I just don't have the resources. And then I was being confined to teaching a specific curriculum a specific way, and I just felt so trapped. And to me, it's not what education was supposed to be. Um,
right.
so I left the public school and I ended up looking into alternative forms of education. I joined a tutoring company for a while as their VP. And just during that, I learned a lot about how students learn individually and how different students process so many different things different ways. And the process that students go through in just decoding information at all different levels of curriculum. But I wanted to get back more into the school environment. And so I
Okay.
was looking around, and that's how I came across Brightmont. I saw, wow, Brightmont, a one-to-one school. That's got to be really interesting. And it was the model, the fact that they felt like everybody should have opportunities to learn, and that it's not always the student that's the barrier. A lot of times, it's just
Right.
environment and
Yep.
its style and how we as educators look at how do we reach this individual student so that I'm simplifying the process? Knowing what I know about this student, how can I help them to understand the information, the learning focus that we're trying to get to without all the other stuff, right? And then how do I get from what this student knows, how do I get it out of them and setting all other conventions aside?
Yeah.
How can I understand this student? And I just kind of fell in love with the model, and that's how I
It's,
ended up
it's
at Brightmont. And I've loved it. I've been here for 12 years.
okay. I was just going to ask. I was curious about how long you'd been at Brightmont, and and in your current role too, in terms of kind of you basically oversee the Seattle campus for Brightmont. Brightmont also, I didn't mention, is nationwide. That has campuses across the country. How many, Tony?
I believe we're up to 21 campuses.
21 campuses nationwide.
Mhm.
So you've been there 12 years, and then how long have you been? I'm just curious at the Seattle location.
Let's see. Well, I've been here for about 4.5 years,
Okay.
and that was something that I really wanted to do. Was I wanted to be in the school. So before I was in operations, I was working on with different campuses. I'd step in and run campuses here and there, but I wanted
Okay.
somewhere where I could just kind of grab hold and help to put my flair on the Brightmont model.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'd say you've succeeded in doing that there. And then how long, I'm curious, how long were you teaching? How long did it finally take you to reach that boiling point and just like, no, this isn't working for me?
It only took about 3 years. It didn't take long. It
Okay.
did
You
not
saw,
take long.
yeah.
I mean, I knew what I wanted and I knew how I was feeling. It's just it wasn't hard for me to realize that I was just miserable. So
So you've talked a little bit about, again, kind of the Brightmont approach. Why don't you talk a little bit more kind of about that, the individualized approach to education? And like I said, especially for those of us who have children on the spectrum, specialized learning needs, what does that look like? And we'll talk a little bit more about kind of real world applications as it's applied to us in Stone.
yeah, and I think it's really interesting because we use the word term spectrum oftentimes just in terms of autism. But when we think about the public school system in particular, it was really created to end up being like a box of 16 crayons, and
Yeah,
where you really have the tools to work with just 16 individual colors. And individualized education, it really allows you to have a plethora of the spectrum when you're working with different students and different ways that students think, different backgrounds, different experiences, different ways, different interests that they have, and looking at how we tie that into their education with someone like Stone, for example. I had known nothing about Stone when I first met him,
right,
other than just some background information, just a little bit, and I didn't know what to expect. And when I first met him, if you're looking at the exterior, you're like, okay, this is a challenge. He's not, he's not speaking, but he's verbal.
right.
But you
Yeah,
know,
he can be very vocal, but he's,
yeah,
yeah, without
yeah. But
speaking. Yeah.
but looking at it, I was like, there's something here, and so I wanted to kind of dig further with him, and I really, Stone in particular really helped me just understand the importance of not judging students by the exterior and how they learn.
Yeah.
Learning is is a process that happens cognitively, and with him, what we did in our conversation was, let's find out what he knows and let's figure out how we can effectively communicate. I wasn't trying to look at all the barriers. It's the minute I met
No,
with him, I was looking at the solutions.
no, and I'd love to take this time really to kind of tell the story to the
Mhm,
audience because I think this is really telling on, like you said, on a lot of different levels. So we found Brightmont after we withdrew Stone from his public high school. We had discovered spelling. We had been utilizing it for about 6 months to the point again where it was clear that from a cognitive standpoint, he was capable of just amazing things, things that he was not receiving in his intensive ed
mhm.
program, and the school wasn't willing to accommodate us, both in terms of the letter boards for communication in class, as well as age appropriate curriculum. So we said, screw it. Like we're just, we don't know what the answer is right now, but we knew that he was not in a good situation there. So we just pulled him out, and originally I just kind of started working with him like with Khan Academy and kind of, but I knew that I couldn't do the homeschooling route. And I really felt for him, it was important to have a formal education, like, really have real teachers and real subjects, things that he hadn't had before. And the attorney that we were working with has a lot of experience in this field. And she was the one who said, hey, you might want to look at Brightmont Academy. And I'll just never forget it, Tony. I remember initially reaching out to you and trying to explain an email, and you gave me a call, and I tried to explain it. And it's hard to explain, right? Like it's one of
Mhm.
those things, unless you see it, until you see it, it's hard to really click, as it was for me when someone first told me about it before we even got Stone involved. So I remember you saying, "Yeah, let's come down here. Why don't you just come in and let's talk about it?" And I said, "Okay, I'll bring Stone." And he was thrilled because I was having him involved in the process of saying, "Okay, you have to help decide what do you want now. You have it now. You have a choice. Like he never had that before, right? Decisions were made for him." And yeah, I just remember sitting with you and Stone, using the letterboard, and Stone, very politely saying, "Hi, Tony. It's nice to meet you."
Mhm.
Right, and the question and answer back and forth between you and Stone, and I really didn't have a lot to do with it. It was really between you guys.
Mhm. And do you remember the first question I asked him? I asked him, "What is something that he doesn't like about school?" And
Oh,
he spelled out, "I am underestimated." So,
wow.
that was so impactful to me because here's a student that I wasn't even sure how I was gonna communicate, and here he clearly spoke, "I'm underestimated," or "underappreciated," or something like that, and I'm like,
Yeah, now you're right. Yeah, I'm sure it was underestimated because yeah, with the
"Yeah."
book and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it just spoke to me, and I remember that whole dialogue to where he constantly amazed me, and I remember I was asking him about it. Can you read? And he said yes. Oh, can you understand what you read? And he said yes. And I went and grabbed the random book of Jekyll and Hyde off of the shelf and brought it to him. And I said, I want you to read real quick, the first page or something like that. And he just like flipped through and he's like, I go, Did you read it?" And he says, "Yeah." And so I asked him question. He nailed every single one of them. And I think that was the point where I think I started vibrating as an educator with excitement
Yeah,
because like, oh my gosh, there is so much untapped potential here.
there's
This
so
kid is
much
he is so smart, and I could see that he was craving learning. And
craving.
he
Yeah.
just wanted a chance to be able to have somebody teach him and to be able to be taken seriously and to be able to be heard on what he knows. And I have never regretted once bringing him in here. It has been positive the day he came in here, and he's still continuing to grow and to learn. And the teachers have loved working with him. And these aren't teachers with big special ed backgrounds. you know these are people that care about kids and that are willing to help and to get to know him, and those aren't things that you read in IEPs.
See,
you know
that's interesting. It's funny because, like, again, you and I have never really talked about the teachers per se in terms of their background. Like I said, we just kind of, like, okay, we started off for Stone. Again, we had to set a baseline, right?
hmm
Because he was coming from this intensive ed background where he had very, little to no formal education in the school. What we did know, what we had learned was he had self-taught himself so many things from observing, as many non-speakers do. He taught himself how to read, as his twin brother had done, taught himself, basic math that we found out that, he was able to do all, but he hadn't really done anything in a education environment. We didn't know. So I remember, I think you initially put him in like what pre-algebra,
hmm
and we asked him, like, what are you interested in? He wanted to do science. So I think it was just, the initial environmental science
hmm
class,
yep,
and
yep.
started with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And with his ability to read, I mean, it was the environmental science is a good text-based humanities science. So I thought, what a great introduction to the environment and something that I felt like it's not going to require heavy math calculation, but will
Right.
still engage him. And it was, I have to say that it took a lot of thought to determine which teachers I think would be the good fits because you have to have a person that believes and have to have a person that is willing
Yeah.
to be
Oh,
flexible
yeah.
and adjust on the spot. And
Presuming competence, right? That's a, well, a mantra within kind of the community. And certainly it's become a big mantra of mine as well. But you're
mhm.
right. That's critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I think about Stone, it's not just Stone or the nonverbal. It's basically anybody on the spectrum. A lot of them are just so misunderstood, and I find that when I meet with them, and I when I first talk to them about what I see and their potential, they just light up, and I realize very quickly how much kind of a system has really made them lose their confidence in themselves.
Oh,
and
yeah.
feel like they can't learn, and or that they're a problem, or that problem is them. And I always have to remind them, You're not broken. Don't let anybody tell you you're broken. Because you have an IEP doesn't mean you're broken. All it means is you might perceive things differently, but you can still learn. It's up to me, and this is the joy of an educator. I
Oh,
get to
yeah.
figure that out. That's my puzzle, and that's what drives me so much, and that's what drives, I think, this organization, why people engage here so much, is because every student is a good challenge, but it makes you think of what's possible.
Yeah, I love that, and like I said, and that shows, and it's really interesting because, like I said, in terms of matching up the teachers, with the students, and again, you hit a home run with Stone. Again, he had environmental science, as we had mentioned. His teacher, her name's Amber,
Mhm.
and I've told the story. I don't know if I've told it in the pod. I probably have. I'll probably tell it again. But it was the first class sitting there, and she was great in terms of presuming competence from the start. She just launched into the lesson plan, just introduced herself, and I could tell he was all excited and going through it. And she paused at one point and said, "Stone, do you have any questions?" And he spelled out yes. And she said, "What is your question?" And he was able to ask, like I said, I wish I could remember the exact question that he asked at the time. But I almost burst out in tears because it was literally the first time in his education career at age 16 he had opportunity to participate, truly participate, to ask a question in class. And later, he paused and said, he likes it. He was just so excited. You could just tell he was just, wanting to spell. And he paused. He said, "I love this." And I can't tell you how many times, both in that and again in pre-algebra and then later in algebra, and he still periodically doesn't do it as often now because I think maybe, that the novelty has worn off a bit. He still enjoys it, but like that was like, I'm like, how many kids are sitting there in their algebra class spelling, "I love this."
Yeah.
And that speaks to the passion that you had mentioned before, or just that yearning to learn.
Yeah, or goes to school every day and says happy.
Happy.
I mean, and it's just such a common thing to see. It's just because we help students to be able to see kind of what's possible in the classroom, but then the comments I get are the things that parents see outside the classroom. All of a sudden meltdowns are less at home. They're less stressed. Students are engaging in other activities, and they're much more confident and happy. And I don't know how many times I've had a parent say, "Thank you for giving me my son back."
Mm.
And that's such a powerful phrase, and it's so touching to know that you can be a part of that for somebody else. I mean, I have 5 kids too, and I know as a parent what it's
I
like
didn't
to.
realize that.
Yeah. Yeah, as a
Wow.
parent, you ride that roller coaster, and you worry
Oh,
about them,
yeah.
and you worry about how they're engaging and what they're going through. You hear about what they're going through, and you wish you could do more. But to be able to be part of the solution for somebody else, it's just so rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. Now I was just pausing for a second because I think I'd mentioned to you before that we have a couple of segments. And so I was
Mhm.
thinking this might be kind of a good time for one of our segments. So I'm going to ask our producer, Dave. We're going to start, Dave, with the fact or fiction segment. I think if we can cue that up.
Get QuickTime ready, and here we go. This is Autism Fact or Fiction. We're breaking down what's real, what's rumor, and what might surprise you. Let's go.
Okay, fact or fiction. So Tony, I forewarned you about this. I think you'll know the answer, but I said the fact or fiction. Public schools are legally required to meet every student's needs.
That's fact. Yes, every student is able to have access to free and public education, and that doesn't mean limited forms of education. They should all have equal opportunity to be able to learn.
Yes, yes. Now again, it depends. This was from our friend, my friend Lila, who I call my chat GPT. Now she said it's fiction, but again, here's the answer. So again, I guess it depends on how detailed you want to be.
Hmm.
So she said, while public schools are required by law to provide accommodations and support to meet each student's educational needs, the reality is often different. Many schools do the minimum required by legal standards,
Hmm.
and which can leave students, especially those on the autism spectrum, or with other unique learning needs, underserved. This is why exploring alternative education options, such as Brightmont, can be valuable for families looking for the more individualized approach. So I think it's kind of a nuanced approach, saying that, and again, we faced that type of an issue ourselves, where it's like, from a legal, what the legal requirement is often different from what the practical
Right.
is, and the practical accommodation to say, are they learning? Are they really having their needs met?
Hmm. And there's a lack of transparency, so parents don't know. They don't know if are their needs being met a lot of times, or they don't know what are my legal requirement or my legal rights as a parent of a student in education.
You've probably come across that a lot,
Hmm.
right? I mean, in terms of a lot of parents who just, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I like helping parents to kind of figure that out. Are we the best fit? Maybe not. But there's other forms of alternative education out there. Now, one to one, it fits most students. I mean, for obvious reasons.
And so, yeah, it's hard to argue with that as far as being, not a great approach. I can't think of too many situations where you'd be like, nope, that's, I don't want that kind of specialized approach, but
Yeah.
it may be.
Yeah, so it just depends, but I'm always happy to. I don't like to ever just say no based on what I read or what I hear. That's why I like to meet every student, and I think that's why I met with Stone.
Yeah, what something else I thought was interesting was, in terms of Brightmont and our experience there, is there's kind of a shift in terms of the expectation, I think, that we have kind of from a cultural or society standpoint, particularly in the US, in terms of this is what high school is supposed to look like,
Hmm.
right? Like, it's supposed to be whatever, 5 or 6 classes, lunch, rallies, football games, proms, all these things that aren't necessarily, I mean, they're all just, you know, things that have been created, right? Like, this is just, this is just the expectation. Whereas again, it's not so much on what you're learning. I mean, in some cases, of course, there's the expectation to get an education and, as a prep school for college, or those types of things.
Hmm.
But what I like is, again, that you realize that it's a real emphasis on learning. But there's also the opportunity for, different types of social activities. I know you've worked at, offer different types of special interest groups and clubs and things like that. Can you talk about that? Especially again, since you kind of, I mean, even though you said it was 3 years, but kind of coming from, like I said, the public education background and what people can expect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that there's definitely a misnomer out there, or a misinterpretation of what one-to-one education is for a student. And the question I get the most is my student going to socialize with anybody? Are they going to be
Okay, yeah.
isolated? And realistically, just because you're in one-to-one doesn't mean that students can't interact or they don't interact with one another. We do have clubs and special interest clubs like chess club and science club, art club, Dungeons and Dragons, where students can interact with one another and as they're comfortable, but they can get those kind of social experiences. But the thing is that when you're in a school that's one to one, most of the students here have some kind of like social awkwardness, or
Mhm.
they like to have that practice. But you're in an environment now where it's understood, and so you have a high level of tolerance for students to make mistakes socially. And so I'd love to be able to
I,
bring that piece
I
in.
love that. That is a great point, and I think I'm really glad you said that, because again, that's something else that I've observed. Right, I love that about the school. Is like you said, you could tell, there's all types
Mhm.
there, but everyone is super accommodating. Well, like there's no side-eyed or
Mhm.
looks, or like, because everyone's their own person, and everyone seems just really comfortable in that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we're doing community service activities with the kids, and so we're that's giving them an opportunity to kind of give back, but to think, more civically, outside of themselves. And but I see students form friendships. I've seen students date. We get all
Yeah.
that. We haven't had a prom. I'm not sure what that would look like, but yeah, I mean, I
Oh, but who knows, right? Like maybe it could just be, like I said, just a school dance, a school hangout type of a thing. I think that's what they've kind of turned into anyway, even in the more traditional high schools. But maybe that's something to look at.
yeah, and I think that um, the thing that I always want to avoid when you look at a one to one is that I want people to understand it's not therapeutic. It doesn't feel therapeutic. When you give students confidence academically, it translates them having confidence socially. And so students are able to engage in their education and explore in a one to one setting where they can truly express what they know and get involved. And it's safe and it's not stressful, but it gives them not just the confidence, but the energy to be able to engage socially, because a lot of students on the spectrum, their social battery a lot of times is like small. You can't see that, but it's very small,
Yeah.
and it can fill up very fast. So if we're not overfilling that while they're engaging academically, yeah, let's give them a chance to be able to explore those other pieces and help make them more well-rounded.
How many students would you say are on the spectrum in your school?
Probably about 80%, which is quite a big chunk of them. I'd say that between anxiety and autism, those are my two largest
Okay.
groups. ADHD, of course, and the thing about autism, anxiety, and ADHD, there's so many things that are common between the three. But
Lot of overlaps there between them.
yeah, yeah,
Tell me a little bit, tell the audience about how you hire the teachers. What do you look for? And talk about kind of the curriculum that's offered. Again, we haven't talked too much about that other than what Stone's taking.
yeah. The teachers, when I hire them, it's got to be about who they are. And not just about like credential or things like that. I mean, I take a look at that, but I need to find people that are empathetic, that are patient, that know the subject areas really well. I mean, if you're one to one and you don't know your stuff, it's going to come out real quick. These kids
Right,
that come, they
right.
learn so much on YouTube that you have to help them decipher what's true and what's not. But also just very deep questions. But they have to be able to be creative, be flexible, and one of the biggest things is they have to have a humble sense about them. That my classroom is not about me, my expectations, my rules, my goals. It's about the students, and that's hard sometimes for people to grasp, especially if I like hire somebody directly from the public school. Sometimes turning that controller is very difficult, and I do have some successful public school teachers
Right.
that work with me, but it can be a tough transition because you're not trying to manage and control the classroom. You're trying to really unlock a student, and for that you have to have a lot of humility to know that I'm willing to take a chance and make a mistake, but I want to learn from that and figure this student out and work with them and listen to them and think there's times where they might know better about their learning than I do, at least how they learn.
And those are all things that are completely unheard of in a public school,
Mm,
a traditional school setting. I believe. I mean, all IEPs aside, whatever, accommodations or things that they try to do, you just don't get that. And one of the other aspects that I think is just so valuable, again, particularly in Stone's case, given his background, is the ability to be self-paced with the learning too,
mhm,
right? You're not forced to like keep up, like there's no expectation like, hey, we got to be in chapter 10 by next Thursday or you're gonna fail.
mhm. Yeah, there's no pressure like that at all, and it allows the students to really learn in places and they get help on things that they struggle with. But it also, on the other side, if they know something, then they don't have to be bored sitting there rehashing something, or they could dig deeper into something, if they've already learned something somewhere else. We come with kids with, again, all kinds of backgrounds and foundations. Being able to have that ability to take a student like Stone and put them in pre-algebra and then algebra and just fill gaps where as we go, that's very powerful, to say, you know what, let's take a break, let's kind of review how
Yeah.
to reduce fractions, and then let's jump back into this algebraic concept working with quadrilaterals. It's powerful. And in our curriculum, we use the Apex curriculum, digital curriculum, and we use a couple other too with our electives. But having that format, it's not an online course. It's
No.
really it's a curriculum that the teachers use as a resource to engage the students in learning. But it allows a lot of
Right, and
flexibility.
they can supplement it, with their own knowledge or with
Mhm.
other, materials as they see fit.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? It helps us to really keep track of the learning focuses that we're trying to accomplish. But if for example, a student isn't really interested in reading Fast Food Nation, there are thousands of books out there, probably within their interest level, that could get at the same exact learning focus that we're trying to get.
Right,
And I think sometimes we lose fact of what skill are we trying to develop in students, right? Not
right.
necessarily how are we doing or what is the mode or method.
Well, right, and it's just, again, kind of the model of trying to fit so many students into the same box.
Hmm.
Getting back to what you said, the crayon box, from public school standpoint, or what you see in a lot of traditional schools, it's a standardized approach, which, let's face it, we don't live in a standardized world even. And so I think some of those expectations that came from, back in the day when, we were in school,
Hmm.
have to evolve and change, because it's not serving any students well.
Yeah, and the way I kind of see it is that, with population explosion, the education system really had to rely on like a factory model where they're processing students
Hmm.
along and helping that things stick as much as they can. But now it's at a point where that it doesn't work anymore. There's so much diversity, so many different styles. Yeah, it
So
it
much,
it
right.
just it doesn't fit. For Yeah,
It's broken
for a lot
for
of students. I
sure.
mean, some students it still works great, but definitely, yeah. For if you're a student that needs something individualized, or you need something tailored, or if you need specific accommodations, a group environment sometimes is very difficult to really get what you need.
I hope you're enjoying the lighter side of the spectrum. So far, we're commercial free, but if you're finding value here, one way to support the show is by considering me for a speaking engagement. I speak on unlocking potential, whether it's for individuals like my son or for entire organizations. I also offer fractional CMO services for businesses needing strategic marketing support without the full time commitment, drawing on over 35 years of experience in marketing. My agency has helped companies and healthcare practices increase their value, grow, and even prepare for acquisition. To learn more about my speaking topics, visit davidcoffer.com. Or if you're interested in our marketing or fractional CMO services, check out coffermarketing.com. If you're enjoying this episode, please leave a review. Your feedback means a lot, and it helps me make this podcast even more useful. Lastly, don't forget to share it with anyone who would appreciate the insights and stories we're sharing here. Thanks again for listening. So we're going to jump into our lighter side of the spectrum tip of the day.
Hey parents, gather around, it's time to speak. We're here with your tip of the week. Strategies and wisdom just for you. Autism parents, we know what you go through.
All right. Nice little intro that we have for the tip of the day. So I've got one, but I wasn't sure. Tony, do you have a tip of the day that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I think I would just recommend that, not to let anybody tell you what your student can or can't do, and you know your child best. Don't let a system tell you that your student's not a good fit there, because it's not the student, it's the environment, and it's how they feel like they're able to engage. But don't always believe everything that's written and everything that
Amen.
is told. Go by what you feel and what you know, and don't give up on your kid, because there's just too many opportunities out there and options for them to explore to get what they need.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was gonna say. Yeah, explore all the options. There are more options today than there used to be, both, and there literally just all kinds of options. Like I said, I've been talking about Brightmont and the one-on-one experience. I know parents who are doing well with homeschooling,
Mhm.
um, with a lot of non-speakers, again, because they're not being accommodated at their schools. So they're able to do access online education, right? I mean, there's just a lot of different options, and yeah, so you shouldn't feel stuck. Now, the question I was going to ask is, again, it's a little bit of the elephant in the room, but we've talked about these different options and Brightmont,
Mhm.
but again, Brightmont is a private institution. It's not a public school, so there is a cost associated with that. Can you talk about, as much as you can, what the cost can look like, but again, maybe some options that families can also look at to either offset or help with that, if that could be a potential barrier, as it might be.
Yeah, I mean, generally for a year of school, it's going to run around $33,000 or so, and that's for individualized education.
And that's that'd be like equivalent full-time student. I mean,
Correct.
like
That's full time.
full class load, like, yeah.
That's right, and there are options because students don't have to do a full class load. They could do individual courses. They could get tutoring. We can work on individual skills. So there's all kinds of different financial opportunities to that. But even with that, for students that can't afford, and if they feel like that the district or the school isn't like meeting their need, I would definitely look for an education advocate, an attorney, and just tell them what's going on. And they'll be very open with you and say, yes, I think this warrants it, or really there's not enough evidence here. We really
Hmm.
need to give the school a chance to do this. But then it might come to the point where a district may pay for it. But you can't promise that. You have to go through the
Right.
process and work with the district. Um, you know, Even though there's a lot of times students aren't being successful, the district I still find want the best for the students, but a lot of times their hands are tied.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot of variables that go into that. I think in general, of course, like you were saying, just like yourself, there's so many people who work for the public school districts who get into it for the right reasons. They believe in kids, they want to help them, they have that mission. But there are things that sometimes get in the way.
Mhm.
Um, Bureaucracy, stereotypes, there's all kinds of things. I think that can creep in that unfortunately impact students, and the level of education that's delivered for them.
Yeah, and realistically, that's why I'm over enrollment solutions, because I'll meet with families and figure out what's going to work best for their situation and their child, and also financially, what's going to fit into what they can afford, whether it's me or us, or maybe if it's not, for some reason, I know so many other organizations out there that I could refer somebody to, and say, I think this one might fit what kind of both what you're looking for financially and what you're looking for academically.
Right. Right.
So
That's great. Yeah. What is there anything else that we haven't covered, Tony, that you'd like people to know about, both in terms, like I said, Brightmont, but just getting back to options and this world, particularly since you're so well versed with autism and questions maybe that you hear from parents, that we can talk about.
I think that we all have to remember that autism is still a relatively new concept in
Yeah.
terms of our understanding. And for anybody to think that they can define our children by an autism diagnosis, or
Mm.
that means that they are a certain learning mode or whatever, it's not true. And we're just, I think, scratching the surface on what the potential is and what the best ways are to do that. But I don't yeah, I just don't think that it's a healthy way to look at things. Um, but it is relatively new to us.
It is. It is new, and I feel like we are kind of we're kind of on the back end of this first big wave of parents and students, like I said, Stone being 18, turning 19, who have experienced it for better and a lot of times for worse, because I don't think that the districts were really prepared for what was coming and how to address them. So I think you're absolutely right. And along those lines, the same goes true for what you had said in terms of the cognitive abilities. You talk about it's so early with autism. It's still really early in spelling, right? We've tried to estimate how many spellers are out there, how many non-speaking spellers are in the world, and I think the estimates are still probably in maybe 10 to 12,000. It's hard. It's like potentially tens of thousands, which is such a small number when you think about the millions of non-speaking autistic students and people who are out there who can access this. So I think we're in the early stages of that revolution. And again, Tony, I just, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for being open to it from the start. You recognized it. It's probably to you feels like it's obvious, that to take that path and to take that risk, I guess, in the sense. But it's not for so many people. And we're seeing, day to day, like I said, I'm one of those, obviously can vouch for the changes that we've seen. And like you said, Stone, not only as a student, but as a person, the confidence. I mean, I can go on and on, which I typically will be doing in various episodes here. But I just think that, like you said, I like that point, saying like, look, we're early on here. We've got a lot to learn.
Yeah. And so we just have to be open-minded and just kind of feel our way, and don't forget to listen to the students.
Don't forget to listen to students. Well, thank you, Tony. This has been great. Really appreciate it. And again, we will be posting links to both your location, but also Brightmont Academy, contact information,
Excellent.
anyone who wants to reach out, learn more. I know you're always open to talking to people.
Yep. No, they can feel free to email. I'd be happy to answer anything.
And I want to thank everyone out there for listening and participating in the podcast. I appreciate all the feedback. Make sure that you share episodes with those who may be interested. You can find us on all the major platforms. Reach out to me, davidcoffer.com. For now, thanks a lot. Have a great day.